Welcome back to the agency inTELL, the show where we deconstruct the brains behind the world's most successful digital agencies. Robbie, we have to start with the elephant in the room, or should I say, the AI in the room? I don't know. The hype train isn't just moving, it's at a full-on sprint right now.
It really is. I mean, this year has seen some crazy headlines about AI, I feel like between Matt Schumer's latest post that was people were in a frenzy. I think when I saw it, it was at 72 million views already. And I was like, and that doesn't count all the reads that went direct to him and from other places. But, it was about, the new stuff with Claude and all that and everything running over the competition. And I mean, we're just seeing some crazy headlines coming out. I feel like the intelligence part of our show name is more relevant than ever, or maybe it's chaotic. I'm not sure at this point.
Total agreement. It's easy to get lost in the tweets and the benchmarks, but at the end of the day, agencies still have to build things that work for real enterprise clients. They need uptime, they need scale, and they need strategy that lasts longer than a model update.
Exactly. And I think that's why our episode today is going to be very timely, because we're going to get past all this little hype and we're going to talk to a team that is literally navigating major projects. And they've been doing this for over 25 years, or the last 25 years. And, they're making it look easy. So this will be interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Today, we're going to be talking with two heavy hitters from iMedia. We have Joel Macuzzo, Partner of Development Services. Joel has seen the industry evolve from the first lines of code to the modern composable stack we're seeing today. He's the guy who understands the why behind the tech.
Yep. And we're also joined by Brian McGovern, who is in the trenches and is making it happen. So from building experiences for the San Francisco Symphony to their incredible 3D engineering that they've got behind the SeatMe platform for venues, it's, like for the LA Opera. Brian really knows exactly what it takes to deliver at high levels for these projects.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking about legacy. We're going to talk about 3D infrastructure and all the edge caching involved there. And we're going to see how top-tier agency stays ahead of the curve when the curve is moving at 100 miles an hour.
Hello. Today on Agency inTELL, we're going to be speaking with Brian and Joel from iMedia. And hello, both of you.
Hi, Robbie.
I'd like to have you guys tell us about your agencies. We'll start with Joel, and then I'm going to have Brian, you're going to follow it up.
Sure thing. Roger and Robbie, thanks for having us. iMedia is our company, and we are a mid-sized agency in the U.S. We create results-driven digital experiences for brands that turn business challenges into opportunities. So what does that mean? We typically build websites for companies, and our clients are traditionally mid to large scale organizations, Fortune 500s and the like.
And I would just follow that up by saying that we are we're a really strong technical agency with a good design focus as well. But overall, we're a relationship company. We establish relationships with our clients that are typically, really long-term, and it allows us to kind of have a long-term impact over the years from a relationship standpoint. So being the trusted advisor is something that I think that we get a lot of enjoyment out of, because it allows us to build value over time.
Excellent. And thanks for the introduction. And again, also thank you guys for joining us on the Agency inTELL podcast. We're really excited to dive into a lot of what you've been up to at iMedia. And I mentioned before we started recording, I'm really curious to hear about this, because a lot of the technologies that you all are working with are totally new to me. And so I'm curious to kind of hear how you make those decisions while you're going into these projects. But, before we get too far into that, I'd love to hear kind of about the legacy of iMedia. Joel, you've been doing this for over 2 decades at this point. And, looking back on the early days, what's the one core value that's remained unchanged while the technology around it has completely transformed?
Sure. I'd have to say user experience. We really focus on our user experience, as Brian mentioned, with what we do for our clients. And when you do a capabilities presentation, there's one slide that I don't think we've changed in maybe 15 years, and that's the one that demonstrates the importance of user experience. In that slide, we demonstrate our chief creative officer, Carlos Alcala, typically runs with that slide, and he'll show our clients a little chart that has the customer or the visitor as the hub. And then there's 3 spokes around that. And then the spokes are the content, the functionality, and the interface. And what we describe is the total satisfaction that the user has between each of those 3, combination of those 3 spokes makes up what we consider user satisfaction of user experience. Or it could be, if handled improperly, it could become a poor experience. So it's why all 3 are equally important.
That's really good. Oh, no, please go on,
Yeah.
please.
No, I was just going to say the site performance is embedded in there, right? There's things like site performance. If you don't have a good performing website, if it's slow, if it's just not responsive, you're going to have a poor experience. If security is a problem, obviously you're going to have a really poor experience, and then nobody's going to show up to your site because you're going to be in all the news about how secure, how insecure your website is. And then really it's about the content being findable. Still, in today, even with AI, you have to have content that's going to be even more so. You're going to need content that is found on the internet. And then once they get to your website, it's what are they going to do with that content? So the usability, the functionality is embedded right in that. So really that hasn't changed, since we started building these things.
That's always fascinating. And because, if people aren't interested or can't use the website, then what's the point of any of the work that you've put into it? And I like that the 3 approach, the tripod approach, content, the experience, you had content in there, you have the user interface, and then remind me the third one again.
Functionality. Yeah.
Functionality. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it feels like clients will maybe lean on one more than the other. Do you have any advice or tips that you've used to help them make sure that they're looking at all 3 equally?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely user testing, right? So going through and having your customers look at in your target audience, what are they looking for? We use a lot of tools like Hotjar and things like that to understand before we go into a site redesign effort. What are people focused on and why are they focused on it? Sometimes you might argue that your visitor is looking at this, so it must be so important. But then if you step back and you say, well, it's because that's the only option you're giving them. And then when they get to that section, it's a poor experience. So we do a lot of investigation beforehand, using tools like Hotjar, Google Analytics for sure, understanding where where people are really focusing, but then take it and flip and say, well, why are they doing that? Why are they there? Did it get your goals? Traditionally, a lot of our clients' goals are conversions, right? That's the game. And then your customers' goals. And then sometimes we go into focus groups and use, third parties. And AI now is certainly, can't say that anything now, right, without including how you can take advantage of AI tools to help you identify some gaps in your performance.
I know. I think we're going to have to start a little counter on this show, Roger, how many times AI is mentioned because, it's everywhere now. It's everywhere. And everyone can't even answer a single question, it feels like, anymore without having to include that. I mean, it's just our world, right?
Yep.
I'm going to pass one over to Brian now. And Joel, you may want to also input on this, but we're going to start with Brian. And, you guys have been in the industry. We started with some pretty simple websites back in the day. But now things are very complicated, very integrated with other systems. You've got internal apps inside of websites. You've got brand experiences. What are the technologies that you guys are leaning on right now? And how are you picking those technologies for future proofing?
That's a good question. So we describe ourselves as a CMS agnostic agency, meaning that we don't come to an engagement with a kind of a pre-canned solution that we think is the right CMS for the job. And most oftentimes, if you're talking about a web build out, you're talking about something that's built out on some sort of CMS, digital experience platform, right? And there's many of them out there. Because of our client base is very diversified, we have a lot of different solutions that we've done over the years, and we try to be as agnostic as possible. Some of the technologies that we have found, a lot of efficiencies with are some technologies. Kentico is one. Kentico CMS for clients that have a large set of needs, whether it be personalization, A/B testing, even some marketing capability like direct to consumer marketing right inside the CMS. Kentico is a great performer for its price point. And then also there's other clients that have a need where they have more of digital channels than just one, and they need to have more of a composable approach, in which case, their platform like Contentful would make more sense. But as you think about like the technology itself, that's really more about mapping the user needs to the technology and making the technology work for that particular end client. There's no kind of one size fits all that we would be recommending. So that's kind of how I think about it in terms of just like how we view ourselves in terms of like our role as being ambassadors of technology for our clients.
And Joel, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I'll give you another counter click on AI. We're looking at AI assistance as another way to augment websites. So the days of chatbot, which quite frankly frustrated a lot of us more than anything. It was just maybe the quickest way to find out how you can get to a person. We're really seeing success now with AI-based digital assistants. We work with a company, AI 1 to Z, and they provide us as an agency the ability to integrate a digital assistant directly into the user experience, but not just to help answer questions, which obviously is very important, but also to guide the user to even purchase path. Think about booking a golf outing on your vacation through a digital assistant and having it be seamlessly integrated. First, you start by asking questions. What's the weather going to be like when I'm there? Which day might be the best day to pick golf? What's the most busiest and all? And one of the things that it does is it's able to anticipate what we couldn't do with traditional search engines. We had to think about what kind of questions are the typical visitors going to ask, and then you built it around those questions. So your search engine, your faceted search may for product or trip planning, like I'm talking about, maybe something that you can really get maybe 50, 60, 70% of the questions. But it's that 30% when people ask a random question that you didn't anticipate, but it's in your content somewhere, but you didn't build a search engine around that. We're able to use AI now to really dive in at that level and bring out that content that might be buried, but still usable and important for 10, 20, 30% of your questions. And those are the ones that are going to, revolutionize how you're going to take your business, to the next level.
Really cool. And so getting into this personalization that we're hearing about, with AI making the website a very unique experience. So it's interesting to hear that you're, diving into all of this. When you're talking about reducing friction for visitors, it sounds like that plays a big part into there as you're seeing these advances. How do you measure reducing friction? Like, how do you show a client, hey, we've been able to make it so the site is actually easier? Is that just in terms of conversions, or what metrics are you usually looking at with clients for this?
Yeah, it'll vary. Conversions obviously is a big point of a big concern. But when we talk about SEO and site visits becoming really fragmented and dropping as a result of GEO or GEO or however you want to say it, generative engine optimization, it's more important to have it be hyper-focused on conversion when they get there, right? So how we measure it is not necessarily going to change at the end of the day. I mean, we're going to use interaction. The actual AI assistant will have a good, data logging and things like that. So we can go back and look and see what kind of questions were asked. Did it answer them correctly? If it didn't, you could prompt it with additional information to make sure that you're, iteratively getting better at it. But at the end of the day, it's, and not just through AI. So we're going to look at how you're being viewed, and we'll go through GEO workshops with our clients to see how you are now being served up through LLMs, and what are you going to be, first of all, if you're not being served up, there's a huge opportunity that has to be fixed, so we'll do a lot of technical things there. And so we'll look into seeing, do you have the right schema? Do you have the right information on your site? Are you heavy in FAQs, things like that? And then when you are being accurately voiced in LLMs, when the person does eventually make it to your site, is your site enabled for directly converting that user? We used to take you through the journey, and we still do. We still have to. There's a perception of the audience that is not going to use the tools, right? But now the journey is happening outside your website. I don't know if I
Mm.
answered your question, Brian. Maybe if you have any other topics on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that there's two ways to look at it. One is like, from a holistic standpoint about like how the content is getting out to the user and how the user makes the site. Once the user makes it to the site, obviously, Roger, like you mentioned, conversion is kind of the number one factor that we would measure, but it's beyond just increased conversion, right? It's about if there is, let's say, there's a site redesign and the conversion went up by like 1% or 2% or something like that. It's the pages per session that I like to look at that tell me if we have a reduced number of pages per session on a overall higher conversion, then that means that the users are getting through the site faster, thus reducing friction. So we always like to see that when we do a redesign, we usually tend to see a significant drop in pages per session because we're consolidating a lot of content. We're presenting the content in a more streamlined fashion. And then if you see that along with an increased conversion, then that there's actually less friction. And I think that friction has to be thought about in both sides of the site. The front end for the users of the site, obviously, but then there's a whole editorial experience on the back end. The owners of the site, the ones who are managing it, they have to be able to edit it quicker. And that honestly, that just comes from client feedback, right? We're just hearing that like we are, really loving this new CMS or whatever it happens to be because it's reducing our time to do tasks. And that frees up everybody's time, pocketbook, etc.
Awesome. Well, and Brian, kind of looking at that, what you guys are trying to do by helping the user experience on both sides. I love that the users as well as the visitors, right? Can you tell us a bit? I know you said you have some pretty high end clients, and I think the San Francisco Symphony was one of your clients. Can you tell us it sounded like it was a success story. What kind of combination of technologies did you have to use, and how difficult was it working with a very well established brand?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the San Francisco Symphony, first of all, they're a great team. They are extremely easy to work with, and the product is really interesting because as they sell tickets to a fixed seat venue. It's like 2,500 seats, right? And there are 150, 160 some odd shows throughout the year that they put on, and so they're selling a fixed quantity of assets to individuals that all may see slightly different pricing for those seats. So from a technical standpoint, you've got that factor, and then you also have the factor that at different points throughout the seasonality for that organization, they're going to be offering subscribers a certain time window so that they can come in and renew their subscription and another time window for new subscribers to come in and buy. And all that underpins the single ticket buyers who are just buying one show here, one show there. And so from a technical standpoint, what we have to do is sort of balance being able to represent the site on a temporal fashion throughout the life cycle. So, and it's top of mind because their renewal season for subscriptions is coming up in about a month. And so we have dedicated environments that represent that system at that particular point in time because it's going to have different flows and functionality. It's going to have different pricing. It's going to have a totally different way that it manifests itself for the user base as it's doing its job getting subscribers to subscribe and renewers to renew. And then over time, it will convert to single ticket buyers once all the subscriptions are done. And in the performing arts, that's a very common kind of setup. But to your question, it leads to some certain technical challenges. One is demand, right? So there's going to be typically there's, a very large direct to consumer
Spikes
blast.
and
And on that single ticket or on that, subscription, start day, there's going to be a huge spike in traffic. So there are some technologies that we use. One is called Queue-it, and it's a queuing systems. Because remember, we're not selling an unlimited supply of goods, like let's say Amazon, right? Where you have to like kind of scale horizontally. We're selling a fixed number of assets, right? Once you sell those 2,500 seats for that show, you sold those 2,500 seats. So Queue-it is a technology that allows folks to come in order of when they got in line in the queue, and they come in an orderly fashion and they leave in an orderly fashion. That's just one example. Then Queue-it is a technology that allows you to throttle how many folks come in on a, every second basis so that you can govern the inflow and the outflow. And then obviously there's also a whole bunch of different edge caching mechanisms that we're using to make sure that like we're offloading assets and serving up things as fast as we can. But what I love about that, outside of the technical aspect of sort of the challenges that we have to kind of overcome, the seasonality of that particular client and clients like that allow us to get in front of the client on a periodic basis and iterate every single year. So every subscription season, every single ticket season. So there's 3 times a year that we're going through the same flows and improving and modifying and making small changes and watching how those changes kind of, impact the bottom line. So yeah, that's how I'd kind of think about that.
Really fascinating to hear, working through these, really high profile ticketing type situations. And this kind of leads into my next question, talking about iMedia's SeatMe technology, which really seems like a game changer. I've bought tickets online before. Usually, you're like choosing these seats and you have no idea what that experience is going to be like. But with this SeatMe technology, you literally get to sit in the seat and get an idea for what you're going to be seeing, which, when you're spending serious amounts of money is really helpful at making that easier. From an engineering standpoint, how do you ensure that resource heavy drawings like this are always performing and responsive when you've got your high ticket events? And Joel or Brian answering this.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and there's a multiple sides to it too, right? Because first of all, SeatMe as a product, you're right, it does allow you to kind of virtually experience every single seat in every facility, which is a game changer. You're right, that all drives on APIs, right? So the 3D renderings are all delivered through APIs. The interaction with basically the ERP that's behind the scenes is also driven through APIs. So there's caching, right? There's caching on both ends, so that we're making sure that we're like caching certain objects for the duration that's needed. And then there's also like the real-time aspect of pricing, like what you probably already know, when you're selling, seats to a live event, the pricing is variable and it can change during the on sale, right? So it can change in that hour. The pricing can go up and down. So we have to make sure that when we architected the app, that we're caching the things that we need to cache and hang on to for the right amount of time, and that we're not caching things that we need to have absolutely to the second real time availability for. And that's sort of that balancing act. But we did put 3-4 years of R&D into the product, and so far I think that we have had a pretty good result. And by the way, I'll mention too that if you've bought tickets to any Major League Baseball, or many Major League Baseball teams, you are going to get that 3D experience. And so what you've seen this pattern in high-end sports. It's in a lot of soccer in Europe. It's making its way into MLB here. And we've actually partnered with the company that provides those 3D renderings for those institutions for this one. So like we have kind of the pedigree of high demand, Major League Baseball, high-end sporting, and we're taking that to the arts as the first and only, seating application that allows 3D virtual reality in the arts. So we're hoping what we're doing with that is we're making sure that the experience that the patrons are having when they're buying other tickets, they're actually having when they're buying tickets for the arts. And what that helps us do, it helps us lower the age of the target consumer, because younger people are going to be biased against not wanting to buy a ticket if they don't have that like visceral experience of like, what's it going to be like for me? Whereas more legacy buyers, more elderly buyers have been going to the, opera or symphony for a number of years or a number of decades, that they kind of don't need that experience. So it serves a couple of purposes.
Cool. Joel, do you have anything to add to that?
No, SeatMe's Brian's baby, right? So
All
you can
right.
see how
Well,
jazzed up he gets
then
by
I'm
talking
gonna
about it.
I'm gonna throw this one to you, and Brian may want to interject some things into this one too. And that is, when you're working with one of your clients like this, and it sounds like to me you're integrating a lot of different things, right? Kentico, maybe WordPress, some custom app that you're building for them. So there's a ton of integration that's going to happen there. So when you're starting that project, do you have a performance stack that you like best, that you think is going to be fast, efficient, secure, and work with all the different technologies you're going to integrate?
Yes and no. It depends. If you're talking about certain stacks, just lend themselves to being on. They are what they are. So, for instance, some stacks are going to be on the .NET platform, and we're going to build on Microsoft Azure, and we just know we're going to be locked into .NET Core, and that's okay. That's fine. What some of our team is really excited about, in addition to all that, because we've been doing that for many years, is you take a platform like Vercel. We are able to do some really cool things on that hosting platform that for some of our projects, like contentful builds, where we can do Jira ticket based builds for specific updates. So it's not like typical QA, staging, production, test environment, we can fire off a build in seconds to test a specific ticket and then deploy that live and roll it back if it failed and do so many cool things there. So we're pretty jazzed up about that platform. And that really allows us to do, what we always talk about is continuous optimization for our clients in a real sophisticated manner using that technology. As far as other stacks go, I mean, it really depends on the product. I mean, a lot of the products that we talked about over the years, the CMS being very monolithic at times, and now we're talking about omni-channel, omni-channel CMS and omni-channel websites, and what does that all mean? The reality is, we've always done systems where we've pulled into, as an agency, and most people in our space, we're pulling in from ERPs, we're pulling in from marketing, automation solutions and CRMs and things like that. So even if the platform, quote, had all the bells and whistles, a lot of times we're still using third-party tools because it's best of breed capabilities. So that's really, I guess your question was, what's our favorite? And so a lot of times what we wind up having to build on is not always our favorite too, right? So it's where the client has been, what they've invested in, and sometimes they're not ready to rip everything down, but we're okay with that because we understand sometimes where we can bring in certain pieces and help make things a lot better, faster, and cheaper in the long run.
Fantastic. Yes, clients do dictate those platforms for you quite often, I know.
Mhm.
So fun little segue in there, you're bringing up Vercel and talking about like composable methods and, this whole concept of, choosing different technologies and, with omni-channel and having to deliver in different places. How have you found that the shift to a decoupled web has really helped with a lot of these situations where maybe, the client's bringing in certain technologies, you're having to plug into different ones here and there? How have you navigated that change?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of years ago, it was a lot of education. We would say, all right, we think this platform is going to be great for you for managing your content, and it's SaaS based. It takes away all the hosting needs, the requirements you have there. It can be served up for your editors across the world, no matter where they are. They're going to have a very fast edge experience for getting to the content. It's also going to potentially, some of the platforms will also serve up in a CDN manner. So again, your clients are not just reading content, right? It's asset driven. So it's almost DAM-like in nature. So that's helpful there. But then they would say, well, what about our search capabilities? Oh, we're gonna introduce Algolia. What about we need a more sophisticated DAM that's not only going to serve the website. Okay, we're going to have to introduce a DAM for your business. And what about, does this product have commerce? Well, no, it doesn't. We'll put BigCommerce in there as well. So, and that's great because and now you're talking about best of breed where they're not necessarily sold on a single platform that said it could do all that, right? So they saw a demo from the vendor. They said, wow, look at this demo. It's great. It can do X, Y, Z. It does digital marketing. It does content. It does commerce. Great. This is awesome. And then it can't do couponing because it's not really part of the feature set, but that may come in the future or something like that. So we're able to then, in those scenarios, when we do an evaluation, a system evaluation for our clients, we're able to ask the questions, well, what's important? What's not important? And then you get them jazzed up. And then potentially sometimes the CTO comes in and goes, I don't want to have 20 different relationships that I have to manage, at different times of the year. And some of these products are going to, they're going to be sunsetted. And now I have to find a solution for that. So single monolithic CMS still has its place. It's great. And it depends on the need, but having content be the king and really the hub of everything, we're able to really say like, okay, let's focus on what's going to be important. What do you own? It's your content, your assets. And then let's build around that. And sometimes a monolithic CMS checks all the boxes and does it really well. And other times we're able to bring in, several different platforms and really have fun.
And so, Brian, you talked about caching. Joel also talked about edge caching, things like this, auto scaling. How much does that affect your projects with clients? Are there walls that you hit where you're like, we can't build this because the infrastructure underneath is just not good enough for those things, for caching and auto scaling? How does this affect your projects, or do you find that it does, or do you always start out properly with everything in place, which we know doesn't happen in a real world?
Yeah. I mean, I from my perspective, I think the good news is that our experience has kind of allowed us to make the right recommendations kind of from the start. And technology solves a lot of problems. So let's say it's a play where the CMS is monolithic, and it's a play where, let's say, Vercel is not in place. So if those things are taken off the table, then you still have the entire virtualized world. So like you've got Azure, and then as you kind of go back from the life cycle of like what used to be metal became virtualized metal. What was virtualized metal is now cloud-based virtualized metal. And now what's cloud-based virtualized metal is cloud-based scalable everything. Everything is up in the cloud, from your WAF to your switches to your net to the networking components. And it's all redundant, and it's all geo redundant. It's great, right? So we can inject as much or as little horizontal scalability as we want. And that's the kind of the benefit of technology, right? If you're in app services, they can scale up horizontally. You can tune them to either do it or not do it. And then it becomes a conversation with client. Like, does client have budget to take that, right? Do they have a need for that? Or in the case that I mentioned before, are these fixed assets? And if they sell out in 5 minutes versus 6 minutes, does it really matter? Not really, right? So the ability to have all the technology at our disposal in terms of like either Amazon Web Services, Azure Web Services, they are sort of interchangeable. It allows us to do a lot of things, and to leverage the automatic scalability at the application level, at the database level, and even honestly, even at the networking level, if we need to get to that, level of redundancy. But we try to make sure that we understand demand before we go into an engagement to make that recommendation. And Joel, I don't know if you kind of
Yeah,
like agree with that, or have another opinion, or what.
agree with everything. I think the one thing I would add is that sometimes the CMS vendor offers their SaaS hosting, and sometimes the clients will buy it slightly undersized, or they'll grow, right? So now they've got an engagement where when we signed up with the client and they signed up with the platform, whichever platform it is, and most of them, all of them have the same scenario where they're providing them, based upon the metrics that they've given them, a hosting solution that can be scalable, but can also then cost money to scale. So we've had scenarios where we've helped clients grow tremendously, and then they have a problem with, well, now our hosting costs are more from our CMS vendor because we're doing so well. And I have to remind them, well, yeah, you're making more money, so that's good, but now we have to plan and budget for that. So sometimes we don't have the ability to necessarily auto scale, but it's driven by the platform, agreements they've had in place. And then we have to get creative, but that's a good problem to have. If your site is being monetized well, and all the metrics are showing you're gaining traction in your space, and your numbers are great. Let's add a little bit more horsepower to prevent that from going the other direction. But just planning.
Excellent. So, kind of diving into that a little bit, you're bringing up something that's near and dear to my heart is partnerships. And as an agency, there's times where, maybe the client's bringing in their technology, bringing in their preferred vendors. There's times where you're recommending vendors, and it becomes a partnership, right? Because iMedia is not supplying the infrastructure. How do you choose partners to work with? And then once you're working with them, how do you help your client feel that the partnership is a good one, and that they can be reassured that everything's going to be taken care of?
Yeah. That's a magic question. In all honesty, we used to do a lot more best of breed CMS evaluations, and really have the sheets that kind of walk through all this pros and cons for vendors. A lot of our clients now have a platform that they've been on for a while, and they're okay with it. Now, the problem happens when that platform does a major update release, right? So the platform is now headless first, and it used to be, .NET driven platform. So now they're looking at things like, well, what stack are we going to need? And one of the equations, believe it or not, that we run into a lot is, or one of the pieces of the equation is, a lot of our clients have an internal team that we work with. So they may have 2 or 3 internal developers that do some of the day-to-day block and tackling that they might not want an agency to do, and still keep some of the knowledge in-house. And we work really well with companies who have an internal team. And maybe they are specifically, engaged in a particular solution that we then have to, they step back and say, well, now it's time for you to do a migration to another platform. Can your team learn Next.js or React, and will they engage with it? And what are the benefits of switching potentially to a platform like that? And then also give them the other side of the equation, which is if you don't, here's platform that you'll be perfectly happy with. One of the things we made a strategic decision many, many years ago was to not be partnered with any. We do have our favorites and people that really, we work great with, and we're happy to build on the product, but we've not ever in our history aligned with one single vendor. So we would always, and we'd always say that we are deeply knowledgeable in whatever platform that the client wants us to work with. But we can recommend a lot as a result of being very nimble and working with basically all platforms that are out there now. And there's something to be said for clients, for companies that have a platform and they've aligned with it. They're going to know, quite frankly, in some cases, a lot more about the inner workings than we might, or agencies like us might. But it's really allowed us to stay focused on what is it that the client needs, what's the best solution out there, how is it going to get them to where they need to go without all the sizzle. Brian, if you...
Yeah, no, I think that all of that resonates. I think that what I would add to that is that outside of like the core stack, which is going to be like the content management system, like there's all the decorative stacks around that. Like, how are you going to establish search? And a lot of times, like to your question, how do we pick the best? How do we pick the technology? How do we recommend it? And how do we make sure that the client's satisfied with it? We've actually had a lot of success with Algolia, where it bolts on as a faceted search, like front end delivery, very quickly and very easily, and allows clients to achieve faceted search with very different product sets. Like if client A sells cameras versus client B who sells like ticketed shows to an event, the underlying technology is the same, and we've been able to kind of wield that technology in a way that allows it for like super fast delivery, super fast search results. And that obviously makes the client, kind of engaged and happy with it. And another one, just if we're calling a few of them out, another one that I've loved for a number of years is called Imagix. And what that is, it's an image delivery system. We call it like a DAM. But what it does is it allows you to serve up multiple images. You can do things like change color, add color, drop color, remove people's faces, focus, zoom in, zoom out, and you do all that through URL parameters. And what we do is we weave that into the CMS experience so that editors can have certain defaults that they use. So they upload one master image for whatever it is that they're, promoting, and then they could have hundreds of different ways that that image is represented in terms of size, you name it. And they're doing all of that just through the CMS controls. And what that allows them to do is to take all the burden off the art department, and they're not creating multiple images that are having to make sure that, like, did I create this thumbnail? In the old days, we used to have clients that had like 6, 7 different versions of thumbnails and sizes, and they had to kind of manage all that, remember where all that was. Those days are kind of over. And when we're adding value back to the client, reducing friction, like we mentioned before, in terms of like their time, that's how we measure the success. And that's kind of what drives our underlying thinking when it comes to recommending some of these like ancillary products around the platform.
And so what you guys have said in both of your answers here, to me, your agency is very broad-based. That's what I'll call it, right? So you're not just a Drupal shop or a WordPress shop. So you didn't put all of your toys in that one little play bin. You have spread that out. If there are other agencies out there that are like, maybe they do need to, they want to expand their technical services, what would be your suggestions to them as to how to start doing that?
Great question.
Yeah, it's because, the hardest thing, right, is when you get into an RFP scenario, you can't hide how many have you done in this platform before, right? So you have to leverage and set, but I would say it's easier I'm not sure there's a secret answer to that question, Robbie, but I think it's easier today than it's been because of things like GraphQL and how you get, and, typically can work with these products. You don't have to necessarily be as deeply knowledgeable in the inner workings of how to best work with the content and, make sure you don't do this. And we did so many, made a lot of money in the mid 2014, 15, 16 years, where people would come to us and say, hey, we had this platform built out by a previous agency and it went horrible. And we would say, oh, yeah, you can't hire somebody who's only done a couple of those and expect it to be great. We've done 50 of those and we know how to do it. It's still true. There's still inner workings of it, but you can, you can be less afraid of getting involved in a platform because a lot of especially the headless ones, you're going to need you need a team that knows React, knows Next.js, whatever the, underlying stack you want to work with is, and just understands fundamentals of integrating to other scenarios. And that's quite frankly what we tell our clients, right? When we say to them, you're going to go to this platform. If you don't want to work with iMedia anymore, you're not bound to us because we don't necessarily have as much domain knowledge that we used to. So we just embrace that and say that it's okay. But if you wanted to go about it, I would say get to the partner networks, talk to the partner managers, see if there's a way in, see if they have clients that are working or prospects that are on a platform. If you're a big Drupal shop and, you can say, hey, look, knowing the side that they're coming from is equally as important as knowing where they're going to. We'll make sure we get people certified, but we know Drupal and we want to go, then you have clients who want to go to Kentico, but they need the people to understand how to get the data out of Drupal, how to make sure that, they can understand what our code looks like now and read it and be knowledgeable about it. I think that's where you can start to get your wins, focus on what you know and focus on the transformation projects when they're there.
I love that. Partnering with other agencies and partnering with contractors too to help you with that
That's a great
transition.
point. Yep. Yep.
Brian, do you have something to add to that?
The only thing I would add to that is that, every agency is going to have some downtime in staff, and, making sure that you allocate time for when some of your folks are like in that downtime for R&D. The great technologists that we have at our company are at their sometimes most happy place when they're implementing something brand new or investigating something brand new. So just honestly, just kind of like allowing that space to breathe, instead of just trying to make sure that every single second is billable, it will result in over time adopting a wider technology set, which is going to pay off in the long run.
I dig it. All right, so we got through the grilling questions here. You guys have done well. You've withstood the heavy interrogation. To close things out, let's have a little bit of fun. I've got some rapid fire questions. Joel, I'm going to start with you. What's one piece of old technology that you actually miss?
Yikes. I'm going to date myself here now, right? I was a pretty good developer back in the day. Brian and I both have similar backgrounds. We were technical people. We still get involved in much of the dismay of our team sometimes that we get involved in coding and all, so that's never going to end. In the 1990s, I started as in industrial automation. So I was building interfaces for plant floor automation. And then this whole internet thing came about and that was pretty cool. But at that time too, I bought a Palm Pilot, and it's a digital assistant, right? And a different digital assistant now, I guess. And I was building a lot of cool Palm Pilot games and apps and, and chess and checkers and selling it from the server that I had on my ISDN line at my house. And I come back from work every day and say, wow, we just sold another 50 copies. That's great. And I'm doing some really cool development for a Greenscale device that had so limited memory, and getting frustrated with, how I can do as much as I could. And just the entrepreneurial part of that type of system led to obviously the phones and everything else. But it was Wild West back then, and that was pretty fun.
That's
Awesome.
excellent. That you're taking me back in time,
Right?
just
I
to
know.
butt in there
I
for
was like,
sure. But
yeah,
yes,
yeah, little Palm Pilot, little BlackBerry, yay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brian, what is the most underrated tool in your dev stack right now?
That is a good question. I would say, and this is going to be a really boring answer, but there's a platform that we use for browser testing called Browser Stack, and it allows you to fire up any version of any device, Android, going back, 10 years, 20 years, like no matter what, every browser, every OS version, every breakpoint in size, and you can fire it up kind of at will. And that allows our developers to actually see what problems, you're going to get a CTO or a director of marketing that's like, hey, there's an issue on my phone. See? And they show it to you on the screen. They're like, no, you got to tell me the version, tell me the exact OS
Mhm.
version, and I can replicate it. And in a world where you're not going to own thousands of different phones, that's kind of a basic, boring answer, but it is It is certainly underrated.
No, I love it. And it brings us back full circle to the user experience and the testing that you brought up in the beginning. I don't think people can do enough testing or too much testing, and that ties in there perfectly. Last rapid fire. This is for both of you. What is the next big friction point that you're excited to solve for your clients?
Generative engine optimization. It's everybody's going to say that, but it's really what people need to understand. I mean, many years ago, search engine optimization and SEM were things that people didn't know about. And I spent a lot of time selling that and being successful. I built platforms that would help clients do automated bid management on their, understanding that our client wanted to be second place and spend no more than, $2 per click or $10 per acquisition. And every time and that was a great lead in for us to talk to people back then about rebuilding their website. Well, so let's talk about search, how you're handling search. A lot of people don't really understand the impact yet. I mean, most people are understanding the impact. I don't want to sound, like it, and again, 2 months from now that this answer will be completely updated, but, it's, generative engine optimization is really what we're starting to see a lot of conversations around. And it's really making people understand how we're going to, we've had comments with our clients that say, well, we don't have to worry about, titles and description anymore because Google handles all that for us now and they do a great job. And I'm like, all right, well, it's no longer just Google that you're thinking about. So it's amazing. Every time you think something is kind of taken care of, something new pops in and changes the game a little bit. So yeah, that's a big one that we're
Yeah.
looking at right now.
Yeah, and I would say that in general, it's helping our clients understand how to harness AI, and geo is part of that for sure.
Hmm.
But just at that relationship level, just understanding the client well enough to kind of help them think through what AI can do for their business and how to actually take advantage of it and harness it. It's a very new technology. There's a lot of questions about it. There's in some cases a little bit of fear about it.
Hmm.
And I'll give you one like tactical example. Like we're building a chatbot through our partnership with AI 1 to Z, but we're integrating it to Salesforce so that this particular client can have the phones ring less. And talk about reducing friction. Like if I'm able to go check out the status of my case, and this is like a large like manufacturer of electronics, and if I can reduce the amount of phone calls that I'm getting to get people their case information, and those same users can get the case information quickly, and they can do that directly with this little chatbot. AI is allowing you to, number one, reduce friction on both sides of the equation, client and customer. And then also, the technology is allowing us to do things like personalize the responses so that if I'm talking about, let's say it's a microwave that I have an issue with that I'm trying to get service on. Well, did you know that we are offering a sale on this particular microwave, which replaces that old one? So now you're talking about using AI to knock down that first friction point and then create more revenue on the other side of it, which is just kind of seamlessly done. You can do that through a number of different ways. The technology can have a page behind the chatbot to change, and all of a sudden you're interacting with the chatbot, but you're actually seeing the sales page for like a particular microwave. These little things can start to like really make a huge difference on the bottom line and makes everybody happy, right? Because customers are getting satisfied quicker, and maybe there's going to be some more sales out of it, and ultimately there's less phone calls. So these are ways that AI can help reduce friction. That's just like one out of the millions of different things that AI can start to do for our clients, that I think it's a really exciting inflection point for us in our business.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Brian, Joel, thank you both so much. You gave us some really good information for our listeners out there. Uh, Actionable tools you've given them to go and check out. So I truly appreciate that. And it sounds like you guys are producing some amazing work out there. So we'll definitely have to have you guys come back on later on
Love
to
to.
see what other big projects you guys have done.
Awesome. Well,
Thank
thank
you
you
for
both
having
very
us.
much for having us. This has been a lot of fun.
And I'm assuming if someone wants to get in touch with you, they can just go to iMedia's website.
Absolutely. iMediaInc.com, or just find Brian in one of the places he hangs out at.
Excellent. Thank you guys both
Great.
so much. This has been really great. And look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Wonderful.
Thanks
Thank you
so
very
much.
much.
All right. So that was Brian and Joel from iMedia. And I am telling you, there were some legit gems in that conversation.
100%. The thing that really struck to me was how they've kept the same core focus for over 2 decades, user experience. But the
Mhm.
way that they define UX in a way that's bigger than most people do.
Yep. Joel's hub and spokes idea, that was really cool. I really liked that. Visitor in the middle, 3 spokes or content functionality interface. And if you do have a weakness in any of those, the whole experience is in trouble, right? It's all gonna wobble.
Yeah, totally. They made a great point that UX includes what people forget, performance and security. If it's slow or sketchy, it doesn't matter how pretty it is.
Yeah, and I will say, I really loved how they're not just guessing on that when they're going in. They're using tools like Hotjar and analytics and testing, user testing, figuring out what people are actually doing, and then asking why. The one example he gave where he's like, "Why are they always clicking on this one?" Maybe that's their only option, right? They don't have the right
Yeah.
option. So I like that.
Absolutely. And, I like how they're intentionally CMS agnostic and, really technology. They're about matching the platforms to the needs. Kintako here, Contentful there. So they're acting like true advisors, not just a one stack shop. Hey, we're going to force this brick into whatever you're trying to do. They're really listening to the client. They're trying to figure out what's the best solution.
I agree. And the friction piece was strong as well. Measuring reduced friction isn't just, conversions went up, right? That's not the only thing. They're thinking of it from both sides, the front end, the back end. So user, visitor, they're looking at all of the experiences to find where friction is, because friction on the user side could be just as frustrating and detrimental as friction on the front side.
Yeah, and I wanted to interject during that part of the conversation and say thank you as a user for reducing the number of clicks that I need to take. That is just all that I want. But I thought what was exciting is, future looking takeaways, right? AI, generative experience optimization. The buyer journey is totally shifting. People are discovering brands through LLMs before they even hit the website. How are you thinking through that process? And it sounds like they're really on top of their game.
Which is the new game for everyone out there, right? I mean, the new game is trying to figure out how you're going to be findable in all of these AI answer tools out there. I can ask my phone, I can ask my browser, whatever, and I've got AI tools everywhere to answer. And so, how are you getting those answers to show your site and your brand and make it clickable so that you're getting that traffic?
Overall, just a great conversation.
Totally agree, and I love that they shared the tools they were using. That's so cool, and I hope that some of the agencies that are listening are going out going like, "Wow, I didn't wait, let me check this one out," I mean, there were a couple I was like,
Mm.
haven't looked at that in a while, I probably should go look at it again." Well, that was a great interview, and we've got some more coming up on Agency Intel, so keep listening.
Roger, copy that.
Hey, y'all, it's the Roger That segment. I hope you're doing super great. Last time I talked about networking events and getting out there and meeting people in person. And I know that a lot of times people are very introverted, especially in this profession. Agency owners can, be a little intimidated by going and putting yourself out there. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about this time is public speaking, which arguably is one of the most terrifying things for anybody to do, let alone an introvert. But it really is important, especially as an agency owner, learning to speak. As an agency owner, learning how to speak publicly is a skill that you can utilize in so many different ways, whether it's getting the team to rally and get to work and do a really good job, to giving a great sales presentation to a client or a prospect, to getting up on stage and actually becoming a subject matter expert and talking to people effectively. And one of the best ways that I've found for getting over my fear of public speaking has been participating in Toastmasters. Toastmasters is an international organization. It's been around for, it's like 100 years at this point. It started in the US, it's spread all over the world. And you can probably find a local meetup or chapter in your area. Just go to the Toastmasters International website, put in your location, and you'll be able to find meetups near and around you. And the great thing is that you're not only going there to work on how to speak publicly, but you're going to meet other people in your community who are doing the same thing. Maybe they're really good speakers already, and you're going to be able to learn a bunch of stuff from them. Maybe they're at the same level as you. Maybe they're even more shy than you are. And that's going to help you in a lot of ways. It should give you the confidence of, wow, if these people can do it, so can I. But then the other great part about Toastmasters is giving back. So you do a lot of reviewing of other people's work. You're an evaluator. You learn how to give feedback and criticism to people in a healthy and helpful way. And it makes you a really good listener when you're evaluating somebody's speech, because you really need to pay attention to them. You can be a grammarian and help people with their uhs and ums and likes and filler words. There's table topics, so you've got to learn to speak on the spot. You get a topic right then, you need to be able to speak for 2 minutes. That's going to help you when you go to those networking events, so you have something to talk about. So again, my Roger that for you this week is start speaking publicly. And if you have any concerns about it, join Toastmasters. And even if you're a good speaker, join Toastmasters. You can help other people become good speakers, and we can always become better at our speaking. So that's what I've got for you this week. Roger that at you. I'll see you next time.
All right, it's time for another segment of Robbie's Radar, where I share tools that I'm actually using in my day-to-day work, tools that have earned a spot in my workflow because of the value that they add. And so today I'm going to talk about a tool that I was allowed in the early access phase of back in 2023. And since then I have been using and speaking about this tool as well from Google. It's called Notebook LM. Now, when you first look at it, you might think, it's just another AI chatbot. But trust me, it is not. It is something very, very different. And honestly, way more useful for certain applications. Notebook LM will let you upload your own content, documents, PDFs, Google Docs, transcripts, meeting notes, just copy text in, website copy, and then it builds this AI assistant that knows only that information. And you can even link out to pages that are on the website and everything that are public information and mix them in with that pool of knowledge. So instead of asking AI these general questions and hoping that it guesses correctly, you're asking an AI that's trained specifically on your stuff. And that's the magic. So, for example, we've actually used Notebook LM with our agency inTELL podcast transcripts because we can upload those transcripts and then we can ask it things like, what were the top takeaways from that interview? And summarize this into a 60-second debrief for us. What themes keep coming up? Or even, if the guest comes back on, what follow-up questions should we ask next time? So all of the answers are based entirely on what our guests actually said. It's not guessing, it's not looking for general advice about this topic, but real insights pulled directly from the conversation. And it has kept that conversation private until we're ready to release it, right? Because we don't have to put it out there publicly yet to get that information from like a ChatGPT or Gemini. So it's great. So it literally is like having a research assistant that has perfect memory of everything that you've recorded. Now, I know the next question that a lot of agencies and owners and clients are going to have and care about is privacy. And Google has been very clear from the beginning that Notebook LM does not use your uploaded documents to train their global AI models. So your content stays private to your notebook, and it's only used to answer your questions. Now, unless you explicitly submit feedback into Google to ask for them to use their information, your data is not being used to train anything else. So it makes it one of the few AI tools where I really feel comfortable uploading client internal documentation, transcripts that I don't want public yet, real working materials. And one of the best parts to me is that when you start looking at that information and asking questions about that information, every answer that it gives you includes footnotes, and that takes you straight to the source. So you can immediately fact check, and see exactly where it got that information, so you can see if it was misinterpreted or not. Now, there is another feature that I'll talk about that it has. It's a little wild, but there's some really cool use cases for this, and it is their audio overview feature. So Notebook LM can actually generate a podcast style conversation between two AI voices based on your content. So you can upload a document or sets of documents, and then it'll create this back and forth discussion that sounds eerily like two people breaking down the material, very realistic. And it's perfect for like when you want to absorb the information while you're doing other things. And really, honestly, it does sound amazing. The hosts feel incredibly real, but I will give you one warning. Every once in a while, it can misinterpret something. So I would never use it as my only source inside of there to listen to my information and to read the information. It's always going to be best if you pair it with reviewing the information as well, right? Asking it questions, seeing the footnotes. Now, from an agency standpoint, the use cases for Notebook LM are endless, in my opinion. So, like, you can upload a brand guideline for your client, generate on brand content. Now, and if the client doesn't have formal brand guidelines, as some don't, you can point the Notebook LM to sources on the public website or other content that they might have that they've already written. And from that, it will learn the voice and tone of that client. So basically, it's kind of making them a little brand guideline, the voice and tone part for you. And then from that, you can upload internal documents and have it rewrite to match that same voice without ever exposing your private materials. So your internal docs stay private, but everything internally still comes out perfectly on brand. You could also upload discovery notes and turn them into proposals. So if you're the one who's having to have those client meetings and build proposals. Also, if you've got internal SOPs, you could put those in, or you could help a client do this. And so then when you are asking Notebook LM about things, it's only looking in your SOPs. So you're not having to like dig through documents and folders and things like that to find this information. You can have Notebook LM have all of that knowledge base in there. So then you can also share your notebook space with other team members. So now everyone has access to that. So it's great. It basically turned your knowledge into this searchable, conversational interface. For me, it has become one of the fastest ways to go from large amounts of raw data and information to some usable content. As with any AI, I always tell you, you're not going to take it directly out of there. You're going to do some rewrites, but it just gets you there so much faster. And so instead of rereading massive documents and just, you can just go in there and ask questions and get exactly what you need in seconds. So this is one of those tools that genuinely changes how you work, I feel like. And if you haven't tried Notebook LM yet, I highly recommend checking it out. Upload something you already have. Maybe it's a transcript, maybe it's some meeting notes from that discovery meeting, and just start asking questions. And I know you're going to see the value immediately in this tool. This has been a Robbie's Radar, and I'll have more intel coming your way on the next Agency Intel episode. All right, we are here for another segment of R&R. And again, it's not just Roger and Robbie, although, that's important too. But life-work balance is what we are normally talking about in our R&R. And so I think we kind of might have a little hint of what Roger's going to talk about that he does for some relaxation. Talk to us about it, Roger.
Yeah, absolutely, Robbie. I love that the R&R works out on so many levels here. And, I think the work-life balance is something that we talk about, we give it some lip service, but we don't, I feel, give enough like exact practical things to do. So today I'm talking about one of the things I love to rest and relax doing, and that's snowboarding. I live in Colorado, so there's a good amount of opportunity for that here. And so, I think that you should find an activity that you enjoy doing. I've been doing snow sports since I was a little kid, grew up in Colorado, so it just fits. But I think there's also an appreciation moment to have. So we're having a really bad winter here in Colorado. And by bad, I mean, we're not having a winter. It just hasn't been snowing very much. And so recently we've had some storms, and we had storms last week. And so then it was like, okay, well, we need to go Saturday and Sunday snowboarding and take advantage of all of this. And so, I think there's this feeling sometimes where we're like, you know what, I'll get to that later. Right now is just not a good time. I'll wait. I'll get to that some other day. Sometimes that other day may not come. And I know that that's a little bleak to say, but take advantage of what you've got now. When you're healthy, when you're able to do stuff, go and try new things, push yourself. And I'll tell you what, when I'm snowboarding, I'm not thinking about work. I can guarantee you that. So, Robbie, I'm going to throw it back to you. What do you got?
So, okay, now mine's not as sporty spice as you with your snowboarding. Mine was a little more meditative. So like this weekend, I went to a sound bath meditation. I've gone a couple of times. A lot of people are like, sound bath meditation, whatever, that is crazy, Robbie. But, hey, this is a sound bowl. So in case someone doesn't know what the heck I'm even talking about, the sound bowls, you've probably seen them though, but they ring out and they send out a tone, right? But what is sound? What are tones? Vibration. What does vibrations do? Moves water. What are we made up of? 70% water or better, right? And so they have seen it does help with lymphatic system drainage. It helps with relaxing the vagus nerve. So if you're a really high tension, stressful person, this is something that might be something that you find helps relax you. If nothing else, you're sitting there laying and listening to some really cool tones. So it's like a cool drum episode is what I'll call it. So, but it's very relaxing and there is science behind it. So it doesn't have to be sound bath meditation though. It could just be yoga. It could be anything like that, but something
Sure.
that they know scientifically helps you to relax. That is what, especially if you're an agency owner out there, it's a lot of tension all the time. And it's a lot of voices in your head coming from a different, your team, your customers and all that. And so going to some sort of meditation that is quiet and like gets those out of your head. Like you said, when you're snowboarding, you're not thinking about it. When you're sitting there starting to listen to these and you're getting more and more relaxed, you don't think about those things as much. Or even if you do, they're more quiet where you can be more contemplative about what you are thinking about. The people talk about, oh, you've got to clear your mind to meditate. No, monkey mind is a real thing. You have to learn to calm your mind is what I tell people. It's not going to be quiet. Our brains aren't designed to ever be quiet. They're calm though. You can make it calm. So anyway,
Love it.
I like it. Like I said, it may sound hokey, but I think it's good. And find something like that and maybe try something like that you've never done before, because that also can be relaxing, that it's just such a deviation from what you've tried before.
100%. I think that maybe there's our connection is find something new, push your limits. Maybe it's getting on top of a mountain and going crazy, or maybe it's just sitting in a nice quiet room and listening to some cool sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, we'll talk about it some more next time.
See y'all.